That Eskom is down, but should we be worried that Eskom could soon be out? We all know about the stage 2 blackouts, which are now going to be in place, we're told, until at least this coming weekend as well. So keep an eye on your, what they call load shedding. I'm going to call it power cuts, scheduled between now and then. You can imagine the kind of damage it's causing to the economy, but is there a chance of recovery, or are we simply waiting for the train crash to actually happen? Well, let's speak to Mike Rossouw, independent energy thought leader. Mike, good morning to you. Always good to have you with us. There's two things that stand out for me. I'd love for you to help me understand where we are on this. One is the Zambia issue. There's a problem, a major issue in Zambia, we're told, which is affecting us. But before we get to that, a quick one. When you say that Eskom is on the brink of collapse, one, how do we know that? And what does a complete collapse of the grid actually look like?
Yeah, I think first of all, let's just clarify something. The grid in itself, Eskom has made plans that the grid itself will never collapse. But what is going to happen, and it's already happening, is that as they have less and less power generation plant available for sending out, they're cutting back. And hence the reason why you see this rapid change between level 2 and level 4. To your question, the reason is that this is the worst year ever in terms of plant availability. It's progressively become worse over the last number of years, maybe 7 or 8 years. Every year, worse and worse than the previous year. And this year, they're running with availabilities of around 50%, and it's never, ever been like that. In fact, in about 10 years ago, there was a strategy and a plan to return the fleet to a reasonable performance, 80% availability, 20% breakdowns, and 20% maintenance. Well, the breakdowns are at 20%, but the maintenance is only less than 10, which basically indicates that the fleet is not only getting worse, it's not only bad, it's getting worse and worse every day. And hence the reason why I talk about a collapse within Eskom of sustaining the generation fleet. But a blackout in itself, there are plans to prevent that, because if the network itself collapses, that's a major problem. I don't think that they'll get to a network collapse, but what we're going to see is sustained and ongoing load shedding. In other words, destroying the economy, and worse still, Eskom's not getting any revenue for this at all. So they don't have money, and they're not generating, so they're making less money, and so the problem continues.
Can we talk a little bit about this Zambia major issue? What's your understanding of that, Mike? What do they mean by that, and why is it affecting us? Has this always been around, or is this a new thing?
Look, I'm not entirely sure what the Zambian situation is. I wasn't prepared for that. But nonetheless, I can tell you that the South Africa is minimal, because the demand there is very small. It may be a situation in terms of generating plant that may or may not have been available. But the impact of countries up north from us on the South African grid, except obviously Cabora Bassa, is not significant. The biggest problem remains the availability of our generation fleet. And as I said, that is the worst it's ever been. And there's no line in sight to show that it's improving at all.
I've always wanted to ask an energy expert this, but I always seem to run out of time. I seem to have about a minute or so left with you, Mike. Imagine in an alternative universe where everything worked and there was enough money to fix all the problems at Eskom. Let's say we had all that money to redo all the maintenance, redo all the power stations, everything we possibly need to fix the problems at Eskom. How quickly, if we had all the money in the world, would it take for us to get out of blackouts?
In my estimation, considering where we are and looking at the condition of the fleet as it is now, I reckon a minimum of 5 years from today before we'll see any reasonable performance, which basically means 5 years of no economic growth and ongoing load shedding. So it's going to take at least 5 years to restoration of the fleet. Unfortunately, that's the reality.
Perhaps in the last 30 seconds I have with you, independent power producers, where do we sit on that? Can we really make that much of a difference at this stage?
Yeah, the IPP program is an excellent program and has shown a great contribution to the production of energy, not necessarily capacity itself, unless obviously you use things like solar with batteries. But The prices have come down. That's now the cheapest form of it's also the quickest way in which to get generation onto the net. Now, I note the minister has approved the new bids. The problem is that the union are not accepting this and are already objecting a bit for their own personal reasons rather than the reasons for the good of South Africa.
Yeah, the unions, I'm sure, is going to be a big talking point as we get closer to IPP and electrical independence as well. Mike Rossouw, it's always a pleasure to have you with us to speak to us. Independent energy thought leader Mike Rossouw. Very worrying when you hear that if you had all the money to try and fix the problems at Eskom in one shot, all the money existed, it would still be 5 years before we actually got that right. Toombs, I'm sure going to unpack that again with a lot of people reacting to stage 2 blackouts for the entire week.
Absolutely, we have to. And also the impact on this on business. I mean, so many of them closing down, so many of them having to relocate from one point to another, so many small businesses not affording these alternatives that we're talking about.
Generators are expensive. UPSs are very, never mind running it, just buying it is also a problem.
All right, we'll be, of course, tackling them and more right here on eNCA.